Hi there, it's Richard. Gee, desperate times call for desperate measures. Anyway, it's an interesting time right now. I think probably all of you are feeling a little bit nervous and scared about what's going on, and so I can think of this in a number of ways. One could be one that paralyzes you, another one could be one that sets you in motion to change your life and take advantage of some of the opportunities to make this a really great experience. I'm going to opt for that one. One of the things that's causing people a lot of grief is the fact that they're having to run to the stores and buy everything, and they're worried that supplies might run out. I think that could be a reasonable expectation. You never know. It's always good to be prepared. But one of the things that we worry about as parents is taking care of our kids and making sure we have enough food around the house. So food security is really, really important. And it's probably a lot easier to imagine having some kind of food security if you're not so reliant on the chain, on the system and the process and the stores and all that stuff. All those things are taken for granted, and you never know. They could be one day threatened. So rather than get caught with your pants down, now might be a really good time to think about controlling your own food security, and there's no better way to do that than by growing your own food. Whether you have an apartment with a balcony or a house with a big backyard, or you're in a country setting with lots of property, growing your own food can be one of the most gratifying and rewarding experiences you can imagine. It sounds to a lot of people like it might be difficult, might be complicated. It's not really. It's actually a lot of learning, but it is a tremendous amount of fun, and it's a great way to get yourself and your kids anchored with the idea of where your food comes from, to control the food supply, and to know what's in it. And one of the best ways to do that is to just grow your own organically without fertilizers or chemicals. There's a whole bunch of things you should be learning if you want to really explore this, but it starts really at the end of the day with the seed, right? You got to grow your own seeds. I've got tons of them here, everything from growing things like tomatoes and potatoes and onions and garlic and flowers and herbs and kitchen spices, things like pickles and dill and hot peppers, There's so many things you can grow. Many of them need to start inside. Some can be planted right outside in the garden. But today, when it's still a little cold out and we still haven't had our last frost, it's really important to get a jump start on the spring. It's now almost the end of March. I think we're about a week away till April. Now is an ideal time to start planting some things inside. There are things that don't mind the cold weather and being planted outside, like peas and spinach and others like that. And there are things that really want to wait until the weather's warmer, but if you wait till the weather's warmer, it's too late to start, because the season will be over before anything actually grows. So that's why we like to get a jump start inside. And we grow in trays, and then we plant to pots, and then we take them from the pots out to the yard after a month or two. So without further ado, I'm going to talk a little bit about planting from seed. There's a number of ways you can go about it. It's really cheap and cheerful to go to your local garden supply center and pick up, a nice quality plastic tray. They can be like $1 or $2, or they can be as much as $8, depending on how good the quality is. I've tried all the cheap ones, and I always end up finding out that they get destroyed within a year or two and then just end up in the landfill, which really kind of irks me. So rather than do that, this year I decided to upgrade my stock and get a tray that's a little bit heavier. One of the upsides is that when working inside, the other trays tend to leak and they'll get water all over your furniture, they get water on your floor, they drip water on things you don't want water and soil and dirt to be on. It is a bit messy. So if you get a good tray, a nice solid bottom, good structure to it, you're going to be probably happy you did. The next thing you need to do is, what do I plant it in? Okay, well, typically you need to start with a good quality seedling mix. A seedling mix is mixed with a whole bunch of things like compost, peat, vermiculite. The peat helps the soil retain moisture, and the vermiculite helps it drain. You want to have your soil damp enough to encourage germination and to inspire life in these plants, but you don't want it to be so thick and so heavy that the plants little gentle baby roots can't make their way through the soil, and you need to maintain moisture fairly constant, and it's not always easy to do, but if you have the right mix, it's a lot easier. You can buy a really good seed starting mix from people like ProMix, or any number of brand name mixes, or you can make your own. I tend to like to use like a ProMix seed starter, and then I work with another one called Tiny Soil, which is a fantastic, really nutrient-dense soil. I find it a bit rich to start seedlings in, so I will just mix a little bit in with my seed starting mix to give it a little bit of extra boost. And then as the plants get larger and can go out into pots, I'll add a little bit more and throw this right into my garden. It's really healthy, organic, pure, natural, beautiful, 100% healthy, nutritious soil for growing fruits and vegetables. So I've mixed a little bit of probably 20 to 25% tiny soil. You can mix in worm compost, you can mix in some other things as well, but and then my seed starting mix. It needs to be kind of damp, not wet, not soaking wet, but kind of damp and moist when you get started. So I'll put some water in. One of the things that I like to do is to keep jars of water around seeding time, because I fill them, and when you fill them from the tap, if you're on a city water supply, there's chlorine in there, and seeds and plants generally don't like it. They don't thrive on chlorinated water. They can stay alive with chlorinated water, but they're not actually as healthy. What you'll notice is when it rains, your plants go, they really love the rain, but when you water it from your garden hose, it keeps them alive, but it doesn't really love it. So if I fill up a jar or 2 or 3 of water and then just leave it on the counter with the lid off for 24 hours, that chlorine has dissipated from the bottle. So now I'm not putting plants in soil that has been fortified with chlorine. Okay? So I'm taking that soil and I'm just mixing up the peat and the vermiculite, the starter mix, worm compost. Oh, great. Sorry about that. And I'm just mixing up the worm compost, seed starter mix, my tiny soil, mixing it up with a little bit of water to get it damp. And it's a lot easier for the plants to germinate and for the water to spread through once you've got it like this. And then I just fill this tray like this all the way across. I don't really pack it in yet. I'm just really filling it. You might not want to do this on your 1960s teak table, but I'm only going to be doing this for a second, and then I'm going to clean it off after. There we go. So I'm just spreading it out like this, as evenly as I possibly can, filling all the little cells. There's 72 cells, typically, 12 rows of 6. So you can plant a lot of things in each one of these trays. You don't actually have to plant all one thing in one tray. I tend to plant about 12 different things and 6 little seedlings of each thing, so that I can get a good start on my spring. Now I probably plant about 4 to 6 of these trays to get my garden going, but for starters, you might just want to start with 1 until you know what you're doing, okay? So first things first, nice and spread out, nice and even, nice and smooth, nice and moist. And then you decide what you're going to plant. So I've already planted a bunch of trays of tomatoes and peppers and a variety of lettuces, but there's other things that take a lot of time to grow. Peppers in particular take a long time to germinate, as does plants like eggplant. But if you wait until the weather was warm to put the eggplant out, you're not going to get any eggplants by the end of the year. So you tend to need to start those indoors, and then definitely do not transfer them out until it's actually warm out there. If you transfer them out when they're cold, they will stunt and probably never really amount to its true potential. Some rules around planting seeds. Typically you want to plant them about as deep as the size of the seed. So you don't have to poke a giant hole in and send them all the way down unless they're a big seed. I tend to take smaller seeds like this one, this is an eggplant seed. You can see them and you can drop them in a little row, one in the middle. Sometimes people will plant more than one. I used to plant like 3 or 4 per square, and then that way if one doesn't work out, then the other one might. Sometimes I get 4 of them that work out, and then I feel like I started this, I gotta take care of them all, and they get a little crowded and maybe you have planted too many. So the thing I've learned about growing in the city is that you're not the only one who's interested in your produce. So even if you think, man, I'm never gonna eat 6 eggplants, grow 6 and the squirrels might get half of them, and then you'll have enough for your family. I find the biggest pain about growing sometimes is you'll plant just what you want, and then the squirrels will get them one night, and all that work goes down the drain. You don't even get to try it. Happened to me lots. So that was it. That was one row of eggplant. So I've got a little piece of paper here. I'm going to write eggplant on that piece of paper and mark this. And the next thing I'm going to do is just sprinkle a little bit more soil on the top of each one of those seeds. You don't want a lot, just a little, just to cover it up, okay? You really only need to be buried by 1 millimeter or 2 of soil. Pat them down a little bit. They don't need to be in there too tight. And then I'm going to water. There's 2 ways you can do it. If you'll bear with me for a second. I can pour water directly into the place that I planted the seed, or I can take a squirt gun, which is kind of fast and easy. And this helps me to moisten the soil without over watering. In the early days you need them to keep warm and moist, but you don't want them to be swimming in moisture because the seeds can actually mold or rot and never come up. So there we go. I like this method in the early days, and then as the plants get bigger you can use maybe a bottle of water. So there we go. I need to mark out my eggplants. I didn't mark them out, but I will do that. I'll write down what I wrote, what I planted, and then that way later on down the road I won't have to guess. For me and for you, probably after you've done this a few times, you will know what each and every plant is when they come out of the ground, because I've learned to recognize them all. But sometimes you might plant 3 or 4 or 5 different types of peppers or tomatoes, or and you want to know what's what. You won't know until the fruit grows, but it really might be nice to know what you're going to grow and then be able to take notes later and compare which ones you liked and which ones you didn't. So there we go. That's as easy as it is. That's Seed Starting 101. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave your comments. What else do a YouTuber do? Down below. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Grow that really needs the bees to go into the flower and pollinate.